I want to tell you one of my favorite stories on miscommunication. A truck driver had been hired to deliver 50 penguins to the state zoo. As he was driving his truck through the Mojave Desert to the Los Angeles Zoo when his truck broke down. 3 hours passed and he began to wonder if his cargo of the penguins would survive. Then miraculously, he was finally able to wave down another truck driver. He offered the truck driver $500 to take the penguins to the state zoo for him, and the other driver agreed. The next day, the first truck driver finally made it to Los Angeles. As he drove into town, he was appalled to see the second truck driver walking down the street of LA with 50 penguins walking in a single file line behind him. He slammed on his brakes, jumped out of the truck, stormed over to the other truck driver and said, "What's going on? I gave you $500 to take these penguins to the zoo." The other truck driver responded, "I did take them to the zoo and I had some money left over, so now we're going to see a movie." Welcome to the 260 Journey and the Apostle Paul's lesson on effective communication. In 1 Timothy 5, Paul is helping us not to end up at the movies with 50 penguins. Bernard Shaw aptly said this: the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Paul wanted to remove the illusions for us, and his advice is priceless. Miscommunication leads to complication and confusion. Just a little miscommunication can mean a lot of problems. 1 Timothy chapter 5 starts off with knowing how to communicate to people. Listen to it in verses 1 and 2. Never speak sharply to an older man, but plead with him respectfully, just as though he were your own father. Talk to the younger men as you would much-loved brothers. Treat the older women as mothers and the girls as your sisters, thinking only pure thoughts about them. This passage can be so easily passed over, and we miss Paul's powerful lesson on how to communicate to different groups of people. All people don't hear the same way. Ages and gender contribute to that. Paul tells us the importance of knowing who you're speaking to and even how to speak to them. It's about knowing your audience. I've had the privilege of doing chapels in different venues. I've spoken to MLB and NFL teams, and there are certain things I make sure to do in those environments. The window is short, and I realize for the entire season, this is these professional players' church that I'm speaking at. I must not only respect their time, but I also must make sure I'm making use of their time. Here are my 2 rules in these settings that to me are ironclad principles that will always be profitable. 1, lift up God's word, and 2, lift up God's son. First, I always bring a physical Bible and read from it. Why? Isaiah 55:11 says, "My word shall never return void." That means better than a leadership principle or a pep talk on winning the game. The best thing I can do for these players is give them a Bible principle, because it will always be productive in their life. Second, I will lift up God's son. Why? Jesus said in John 12:32, "If I'm lifted up, I'll draw all men to myself." When you don't lift Jesus up, then people get attracted to you, and I don't have what they need. The Apostle Paul gave us his important chapel rules to when you're talking to certain groups of people. He said when you have to have a hard conversation with a person older than you, harsh and hard talk must be dispensed with, and you must take the posture of a son and see that person like a parent. This strategy goes if you're a supervisor with senior citizens on your staff to having to tell your elderly neighbor to keep their dogs off their lawn. Plead with them as if they were your own father. He says the same treatment goes for elderly women also. His plea to speaking to our peers is much needed also in our generation. He said, young men, talk to other young men as beloved brothers, like they're your own flesh and blood. And when you see a young lady, treat them as flesh and blood also, but keep your thoughts pure about them. This is profound communication advice from the Apostle Paul for all of us. Warren Buffett is the 3rd wealthiest man in the world and was recently with some young entrepreneurs who asked him to share one piece of advice for 20-somethings who just graduated university. Listen to what Buffett said. One easy way to become worth 50% more than you are now, at least, is to hone in on your communication skills. If you can't communicate, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. Nothing happens. You can have all the brain power in the world, but you've got to be able to communicate it, Buffett said. 1 Timothy was keeping us from winking in the dark. He was helping us, all of us, to communicate effectively and not bring the penguins to the movies. Knowing how to talk to people is an art and hard work, and there's so much to consider, according to the Apostle Paul. According to the Harvard Business Review, the number 1 criteria for advancement and promotion for professionals is the ability to communicate effectively. And the Apostle Paul gave you a tool in communication in 1 Timothy 5. Thanks for joining the 260 Journey.